One of the speakers earlier mentioned that there's a larger historical discussion to be had here, and I would agree. The understanding of many people of what history is, what historic architecture is, the purposes of this commission are, there seems to be a lot of variation in what people think of that. And so I'm glad to have that discussion. It should be many contexts for that. One is our discussion earlier in this meeting of the Owens Valley Patsiatis nomination as well, which to me, among other things, pointed out just how important it is to know, research, understand, and communicate history. What happened? In the case of St. Francis Woods, I do believe that, according to the standards, as Luis was talking about before, that this the proponents have made the case. This is a historic district. Why is it historic? What is history? Well, in this case, it's about planning. And I would place the history of St. Francis Woods in a larger history, a larger expanse. I mean, the Owens Valley conversation went back millennium, I guess. This is only about 100 and some years. Nonetheless, there's been evolution, and we need to understand that. What is the evolution of planned communities, especially in America? It's a very interesting process. This is a fairly small example, but as Commissioner Hoyos mentioned, it is part of a larger tradition going back to Frederick Law Olmsted and so forth. There are a number of, what is it all about? The idea of planning was to make better communities, better, healthier, more conducive to raising your children in a good environment, putting residents close to nature, providing fresh air, providing diversity also in many ways. I'd point out that St. Francis Woods was near a transit site. It was a transit-oriented development from 1912 beginning. This is an issue which, of course, is of great concern today as well. So I'm very uncomfortable with the speakers who reduced the history of St. Francis Woods to racism. Yes, it did have those racist covenants, as many, many communities across America did in a certain period of time. I was very interested that Paul R. Williams designed a house in St. Francis Woods. He was, of course, an African-American in the early and middle 20th century. First African-American to become a member of the AIA, when that was a very difficult thing to accomplish. Whatever house he designed, he probably could not have lived in it at that time because of those racial covenants, which is part of history, which is something we need to know and we need to communicate. But again, I don't want to reduce St. Francis Woods to just its history of racism. The history of planned communities is much broader than that. I feel that part of our work here in approving nominations is to point out examples, both good and bad, perhaps, in history of what should we do now, looking forward. That's why I feel that St. Francis Wood is a historic district, deserving of that nomination, and with all of the information about it to go forward. I would also say, again, this planned communities, St. Francis Wood is fairly small, certainly economically very focused on people who could afford to live there at that time. But that's not true of all planned communities. And you look at the history of planned communities and other qualities begin to be involved with it. Diversity, mass transit, doing away with the racial covenants as well. So that, for example, I live in one of the successor planned communities of Irvine down in Orange County from the 1960s, much larger, but incorporating new ideas in how to make a better life for people to live, borrowed in some ways some of the Olmsted ideas, but then added new ones, including socioeconomic diversity. So you have apartments and you have beautiful single family homes all mixed together. That's just one example. That's what the importance of history is. That's why this nomination, I think, is important. St. Francis Woods is important. We have approved other planned communities. I'm really glad that the history of planning in California is being recognized in this forum, by the National Register at this time. California has been accused, of course, of being, just pure unplanned sprawl, without logic, without effect, without considering values. The historic record, when you look at it, belies that. And this is one example of a very well-written nomination. So that is why I will vote in favor of this.
Thank you, Commissioner.